Hello guys, welcome back. I'm Yusuf Shakeel and you are watching CSS tutorial series. In this video, we are going to learn about CSS Margin property. So let's get started. Alright, so I have opened brackets and now I'll go ahead and create a new file and I'll save this as margin.html and I'll write the following HTML code. So we have the doc type HTML, opening and closing HTML tag. We have the opening and closing head tag, and we have set the title for this page to margin. Now inside the CSS folder, we'll create a new file and we'll save this as margin.css. And now inside the margin.html file, inside the head, we'll include this margin.css file which is inside the CSS folder. So for that, we'll write link rel style sheet and we'll set href to css/margin.css. And now we'll open this in live preview. Alright, so we have this image and it represents an HTML element. The blue region is the content of the HTML element and it has a width and height. The green region represents the padding for that element, and the yellow region is for the border, and outside the border we have this orange region which represents the margin. Margin is a space around this HTML element which separates it from other HTML elements in the page. Alright, let's say we have a paragraph and this paragraph has an ID, let's say sample-p1, and the content of this paragraph is hello world. So inside our CSS file, since we are going to target this paragraph having ID sample-p1, so we'll write hash sample-p1 and let's give this paragraph a border of 1 pixel solid #111. And now let's say we want to give this paragraph a margin of 50 pixels at the top. So we'll write margin dash top and we'll set this to 50 pixels. And now you can see this element, our paragraph having content hello world, is pushed down 50 pixels from the top. And let's say we want to give this paragraph a margin of 50 pixels at the right side. So we'll write margin dash right and we'll set the value to 50 pixels. And let's say we want to give this paragraph a margin of 50 pixels at the bottom. So we'll write margin dash bottom and we'll set this to 50 pixels. And similarly, let's say if we want a margin of 50 pixels at the left side of this element, that is our paragraph. So we'll write margin dash left and we'll set this to 50 pixels. And to check the margin of this element, that is this paragraph having ID sample-p1, we'll right click on it and select inspect, and this will open DevTools, and we can see that this element is having a border of 1 pixel at the top, right, bottom and left. This is because of this line border 1 pixel solid #111. And we can see that this paragraph, that is this element, is having a margin of 50 pixels at the top, 50 pixels at the right side, 50 pixels at the bottom, and 50 pixels at the left side. So we have the margin property, and to set the margin at the top of an element, we use the margin dash top property, and it can take value in pixel and percentage. And if you want to set the margin at the right side of an element, we use the margin dash right property, and it takes value in pixel and percentage. And if you want to set the margin at the bottom of an element, we use the margin dash bottom property, and it also takes value in pixel and percentage. And if you want to set the margin at the left side of an element, we use the margin dash left property, and it takes value in pixel and percentage. Now we can combine these four properties into one by using the margin property. So let's say we have another paragraph inside our HTML file, and let's say it has an ID sample-p2, and its content is happy. And now inside our CSS file, we'll write hash sample-p2, and let's give this a border of 1 pixel, solid hash 111. And since we want to combine this four properties into one by using this margin property, so we'll write margin, and this takes four values. The first one is for the top, second one is for the right, third is for the bottom, and fourth is for the left side. And let's say we want to give this element, that is this paragraph having ID sample-p2, a margin of, let's say, 50 pixels at the top. So our first value will be 50 pixels. And let's say we want to give this element a margin of 60 pixels at the right side. So our second value will be 60 pixels. And let's say we want to give this element a margin of 70 pixels at the bottom. So our third value will be 70 pixels. And let's say we want to give this element a margin of 80 pixels at the left side. So the fourth value will be 80 pixels. And now if we inspect this element in DevTools, we'll see that this element is now having 50 pixels margin at the top, 60 pixels margin at the right side, 70 pixels margin at the bottom, and at the left side we have 80 pixels margin. So we are combining the value of these four properties into one single line using the margin property. Now let's say we want to give this paragraph having ID sample-p2 a margin of 50 pixels at the top, and we want to give a margin of 60 pixels at the right side and at the left side, and we want to give this element a margin of 70 pixels at the bottom. So we want to give same margin value at the right and at the left. So in that case, let me comment this out. So in that case, we can merge the right value and the left value into one. So we'll write margin, and this time we'll have three values. The first one is for the top, second one is for the right and left, and the third one is for the bottom. And since we want 50 pixels margin at the top, so the first value will be 50 pixels. We want 60 pixels margin at the right and left, so the second value will be 60 pixels, and we want 70 pixels margin at the bottom. So our third value will be 70 pixels. And now if we inspect this element in DevTools, we can see this element is now having 50 pixels at the top, 60 pixels margin at the right side and left side, and this element is having 70 pixels margin at the bottom. Now let's say we want to give 50 pixels margin at the top and bottom, and let's say we want to give 60 pixels margin at the right side and left side. So in that case, we'll write margin, and this time we'll have two values. The first one for top bottom, the second one for right and left. So we are merging the value of top and bottom into one, and we are merging the value of right and left into one. And since we want 50 pixels margin for top and bottom, so our first value will be 50 pixels, and we want 60 pixels value for right and left, so our second value will be 60 pixels. And now if we inspect this element in DevTools, we can see this element is now having 50 pixels margin at the top and bottom, and it is having 60 pixels margin at the right side and at the left side. So in this case, we are merging the top and bottom value into one, and we are merging right and left value into one. So our margin property is having two values. First one for top bottom, and the second value for right and left. Now let's say we want to give this element paragraph having ID sample-p2 a margin of 50 pixels on all the sides, top, right, bottom and left. So we can either use these four properties to set the margin of 50 pixels at the top, right, bottom and left, or we can use the margin property and set one value. So in this case, we'll write margin and we'll have one value. So we are combining the top, right, bottom and left value into one single value. So our margin property will now have one value, that is 50 pixels. And this 50 pixels margin will be applied on all the sides. So the top margin will be set to 50 pixels, the right margin will be set to 50 pixels, the bottom margin will be set to 50 pixels, and the left margin will be set to 50 pixels. So now if we inspect this element in DevTools, we can see this element is now having 50 pixels margin at the top, at the right side, at the bottom, and at the left side. So this is the shorthand notation. So if you want to set margin at the top, right, bottom and left, and we want to use different values for the four sides, so in that case we write margin and we set four values. The first one is for the top, second is for the right, third is for the bottom, and the fourth one is for the left side. And this can be in pixel and percentage. So in this example, we are applying 50 pixels margin at the top, 60 pixels margin at the right side, 70 pixels margin at the bottom, and 80 pixels margin at the left side. And if you want to apply, let's say, different values at the top and bottom, and we want to apply same value at the right side and left side. So we'll write margin, and we'll have three values. The first one will be for the top. The second value is for the right and left. So we are combining the right and left into one. And we'll have the third value for the bottom. And these are in pixels and percentage. So if you look at this example, in this case, we have a margin of 50 pixels at the top. We have a margin of 60 pixels at the right and left, and we have a margin of 70 pixels at the bottom. Similarly, let's say if we want to apply X value margin at the top and bottom, and let's say we want to apply Y value margin at the right side and left side. So in that case, we'll write margin, and we'll have two values. The first one is for the top bottom combined together into one, and we'll have the second value for right left combined together into one. And these values are in pixels and in percentage. So in this example, we have a margin of 50 pixels for top and bottom, and we have a margin of 60 pixels for right and left. And finally, if we want to apply same value margin on all sides, then in that case, the shorthand notation is margin, and we use one single value for top, right, bottom, and left. So we combine them into one. And this value is also in pixels and percentage. So in this example, we have set the margin property to 50 pixels value. So we are applying a 50 pixels margin at the top, right, bottom, and left. Now let's say we have a div inside our HTML file, and let's say we have an ID for this div, sample-div1. And inside this div, let's say we have a paragraph, and it has an ID sample-p3. And the content of this paragraph is, let's say, Superman. So this div having ID sample-div1 is the parent element, and this paragraph having ID sample-p3 is the child element. So this paragraph is the child or the descendant of this div, and this child element or the descendant can inherit the margin value of its parent element. Now let's say we want to give this parent element, that is this div having ID sample-div1, a margin of, let's say, 30 pixels. So inside our CSS file, we'll write hash sample-div1, and let's say we will give this a border of 1 pixel, solid hash 111, and we'll set the margin value to 30 pixels. So now this div having ID sample-div1 is having a margin of 30 pixels at the top, right, bottom, and left. Now let's say we want this paragraph, which is a descendant of this div, and let's say we want this paragraph to inherit the margin value of its parent. So inside our CSS file, we'll write hash sample-p3. Since this paragraph is having ID sample-p3, so we'll write hash sample-p3, and let's say we give this paragraph a border of 1 pixel, solid hash 111, and now we want this paragraph to inherit the margin value from its parent. So we'll write margin, and we'll set the value to inherit. And now you can see this paragraph is having some margin around it. So if we inspect this paragraph in DevTools, we can see it has a margin of 30 pixels at the top, 30 pixels at the right side, and 30 pixels at the bottom, and 30 pixels at the left side. And if we inspect this div, which is the parent of this paragraph, we can see it also has a margin of 30 pixels at the top, right, bottom, and left. So the paragraph is inheriting the margin value from the div, that is its parent. Alright guys, this brings us to the end of this tutorial. I'll post the tutorial notes on my website tyclassroom.com. The link will be in the description, and all the code that we are writing in this tutorial series, I'll post them in my GitHub repository. The link will be in the description, so feel free to check that out. And if you find this video interesting, then please give this video a like and please subscribe my channel. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, and like always, stay happy and keep smiling. Bye.